Roundtable aims to explore together how we can stretch the meanings and ambitions of education beyond a fixation with academic achievements.
Going into university, I was very petrified that I wasn't going to cope with it, or that I felt like I needed help the entire time with everything that I did. But luckily, with the staff of Winchester, as well as my friends that I made in the course, and the people that were in my dissertation piece are in the audience, I can see you, they've really helped me gain that confidence and made me kind of claim that autonomy, that actually that I can do this and that I'm capable of producing really high quality work.
When I started at Winchester, I'd been at a ballet school my entire life, and it was very rigid, and I thought I had to be as able-bodied as I could, because in the ballet I was doing, it was this or nothing. You had to do it right. And particularly my first year, I struggled coming to terms with that it's okay that I can be different in class. It's kind of allowed me to have a broader expectation of what I can do as a dance artist as I continue to grow, and once I finally leave Winchester, I'll be able to kind of accept my autonomy as a disabled dance artist.
So for me, I would say myself that I have an invisible disability, because day to day, when anyone meets me, they think I'm completely normal, which is true. Like, I go about my day normally, I turn up to lectures normally, I can pick up choreography very, very easily. Like Leia, I had very rigid training. I was really going to go down the musical theatre/commercial route. I was going to audition with places like Down Performers, Italian Conti, but in the end, I didn't end up auditioning for them, because I was there like, my mental health isn't going to be benefited by going down that route, so that's why I ended up going to university.
Our kind of version of inclusivity, if that's the way of putting it, is potentially different to how others might interpret it, but I think there's lots of commonality. Now, as I mentioned, we mostly work with people with learning disabilities, so when we put focus on inclusivity, we think about people with learning disability first, and for us it means really services, high quality services, which meet individual needs and not assuming one size fits all. So I think there's a lot of common ground on that area.
For me, it's getting the fit right between what I offer, how I structure a session, and what is most likely to lead to experiences which will fulfil the aims. The aims are always enjoyment, engagement, and taking part in offering opportunities for creative expression. So then, coming to your question, how do I know what I think I know about whether or not those have been achieved? Okay, and there is still a preponderance of questionnaires and so on. I'm really interested in finding creative methods of measuring the impact of whether or not I got the fit right, and that's to do with, first of all, observing, listening, being open, as opposed to coming in with my agenda, which I'm going to teach you this. If you watch very carefully, you'll be able to do it as well as I can do it. Right, completely different to creating a structure where, hopefully, and what does engagement look like?
And for us, inclusion is really about enabling people to be able to access those cultural spaces that generally people would take for granted. And that includes good quality training, but it also means access to those venues to perform in, and also just going out in the evening, because a lot of people have, maybe even those living independently, will have lots of issues about how they get to and from venues, and usually carers that will want to go home much earlier than a show will finish.
And so you talk about creative decisions and time as well. There's a very practical time element. So we look, especially with Darwin, our creation time is actually quite restricted. But in terms of sort of creative decisions in the room and in performance, our time scale that we have to perform. Just going back to something that Diane was talking about earlier, which was really lovely to hear. You said you do choreography that doesn't depend on memory, and it's very similar to what we were we were talking about in how we work, especially the Darwin project at the moment. I'd really like it to be seen pushed a little bit more, and it is that we use a lot of structured improvisation, but it's very much about, and this is what we'll talk about from the very beginning when we start the project, is about listening to each other and bring it back to something Beatrice also says about the actual movement that happens in the room together and learning from that absolute face-to-face experiential moment. What can we learn from that in an inclusive manner? And that is, everybody is neurodiverse.
I have a follow-up question about how those practices of time support translate to an HE context, particularly in the context of sort of fighting for 3-hour teaching slots instead of 2.
So, I think it's definitely a challenge, for curriculum design and timetabling and trying to put 2 classes together. And yes, I mean it's very similar to collaborative work. It does take more time.
When I think about your words, your suggestions of time and support, I was thinking about what came to me was the phrase "taking time to care" or "taking time to attend." And I'm really interested in how, as a practitioner and as a researcher, what happens when we give each other attention. I think extraordinary things happen, in my experience, both as a psychotherapist and as a choreographer, when we give people our attention, our full embodied attention. And one of the ways that I kind of work with that, and my current project, Moving Kinship, is with families where one person has been diagnosed with young onset dementia. And to just briefly say, we create, with my dance company, we create bespoke dances based on their autobiographical stories. We perform the dances for them, and then they join in a structured movement improvisation. And kind of running through this with this kind of idea of care or support is this ethos for me around what I describe as the ethics of engagement. And that's really attending to the very contingent, temporally contingent issues of safety, of consent, of appreciation for difference, of dignity. I'm thinking about how barriers in university education really reflect the wider social and global values around fear of difference, and also getting back into the academy, what the whole question, which is still entrenched in binaries around what constitutes knowledge, and this reflects what you were saying, Diane, about then how do we how do we engage creatively with disseminating and describing impact? And knowledge is not only in texts and numbers, knowledge is in bodies and the relationship between bodies and environments, and between human bodies and more than human bodies and non-human bodies. So knowledge is a many-fold process.
And I think, because we're talking about creativity and how to nurture it, but I think the university system, the higher education system, there isn't enough time to nurture creativity, to really nurture that articulation for knowledge. And I think, and there's this huge focus on meeting this grade, meeting this criteria, and obviously I've had to struggle with it because that system is not built for me.
From our perspective, and then that's obviously a massive barrier for us as well, because it's higher education and FE and anything else that's kind of assessment based, that is based upon a set of principles about achieving grades that have different values is really problematic for a lot of people. And I think the challenge to the university more is how would you make that more accessible and a kind of level playing field that works for everybody.
That's what we experience as one of the key barriers for our dancers, is that graded qualification that's expected in order to access university. So that really pretty much rules out the majority of our dancers, many of whom are not only ambitious but have the ability really to develop and should be able to access
expectation side of it, the expectation for high quality, like the Lavery, we expect high quality work, and it's how we that in an inclusive way.
I think linked with that, definitions of high quality work. And I was going to invite you all what your definitions of success are.
I suppose I have one question, which is maybe a bit existential, but connects with the idea of quality. And that's, how do we give agency and visibility to neurodiverse art and artists, and really kind of create a platform that demonstrates the social value and the artistic value of those art forms?
So I don't practice creatively in the sense that, you know, I'm not a dancer or an actor or whatever. My practice is as a researcher, and I try to understand the creative process. And I've heard a lot here about the sort of the growth that individuals can experience through engaging in creative practices, and the benefits of inclusivity for that. Another thing that's often discussed is how inclusivity impacts on the creativity of a group. And I just really wondered what people's reflections on that might be. How does the creative outcomes for the groups change as a result of inclusive practices? Do they?
Question for me from an HE perspective is how this sort of filters upwards, I suppose, to you know the people that are making the decisions about how we assess and when we assess, and you know, how we articulate the importance and value of that, not just as an add-on, as something that we are obliged to do as education providers in order to create an accessible environment for students, but actually how do we find ways of stressing the importance of this as a university-wide, you know, model in the context of marketisation, in the context of, you know, of business models and standardisation. You know, what tools do we have at our disposal as practitioners, as researchers, as students, in order to, what language are we using to try and articulate the value of that, how we're doing that?
I guess my question would be, what will be your small act of activism? Because it starts with those conversations that are happening in the studio when we're making, when we're performing, when we're creating, and then how can we extend those conversations to those that might not even think that they need to listen?